Welcome back to the Caniac Chronicles, folks. I'm your chronicler, Andy, and this is episode 22 of season 1. Okay, it's been a nice week to be a Canes fan, right? Tough loss against Chicago there in the shootout. Oliver, what was his name? Oliver Moore on his 21st birthday dropped the mitts with Nikishin. Fantastic first fight for the both of them. I thought it was, big of him to kind of step in there for his teammate. And Nikishin delivered a very clean hit in that game. But I kind of get the instigation there of wanting to fight Nikishin, wanting to stand up for his man. I don't think he was necessarily standing up for that being a bad hit so much as it was standing up for it being a pretty heavy hit and needing to not necessarily be checked in a way, like checks and balances, but certainly it needed to be met with like a physical message, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And, clearly it ends up paying off for the kid because later on in the game, he does end up winning the Blackhawks the game in the shootout, round 4, I believe. Freddie Anderson was in net that night. What can you expect? But overall, it's just been a great run here for Carolina. I'll have to pull them up in the standings here, and we'll see where they're at officially. But they've had a good string, not just in the last week. We've been talking about it for a few episodes now, but they've come down to the wire here, leading into this Olympic break with a very condensed schedule, a very jam-packed schedule, a heavy travel intensive and obviously game intensive, and you're also fitting in practices and lifts in between, and it's debilitating. And so they've made their way through pretty much the gauntlet of the regular season. I do believe when they come back, the strength of schedule I think will be there still. I think they have a pretty decent set of opponents, coming off the Olympic break. But like we said in the last episode, they're sitting in a very comfortable position, and as long as they don't stray away from the path, they will inevitably end up clinching a playoff spot here. So good news there. Good news if you're a Buffalo fan this week. They've had a very good bounce back week since losing that tough one in Carolina about a week and a half ago now. So it's just, overall the message is it's been great. Carolina's been playing great. I think that's very evident. Everybody's happy. Everybody's talking about it. There's good things to say about every single player that is, setting foot on the ice, whether it's Nikishin and showing us a new elite component of his, overall game. Pretty much every game we see him. He steps up in a new way almost every time I watch, him for 60 minutes. He'll do it at least at some point, and I'll say, wow, he really took another step there, or he took another level there to his game. And he's just becoming more and more. I said it on a couple posts after the game. It's like compound interest. He's just returning more and more value to us each time we watch him, and it's great to see him develop. I'm kind of harping on him because I think there's a lot of conversation out there. I don't know who it's, what media people, personalities it's coming from, but there's chatter out there that he could be on the trade block. I have seen that if that is the case, it will most likely have to be sort of a 1-for-1 in terms of caliber. And so, my immediate thought is like Akil Makar. I've already compared him to that of Akil Makar, a Russian version of him, if you will. A guy who has now proven that he can fight. He can lay the boom very cleanly. He's a very clean checker, which is huge, especially when you're hitting with that level of intensity. You really need to be dotting your I's and crossing your T's going through that process, because the refs will ding you for, I got called for it as a youth, in youth hockey, and my mom famously captures it on home video camcorder. I come in, I hit a guy, heavy hit in the boards, tons and tons of noise coming from the collision there, but it was a clean hit. and I immediately get dinged for, I don't know. I thought at the time it was like an interference. Maybe I said maybe the puck trickled away and he had lost possession, and then I hit him. I don't know. I guess I'm probably just going in for having a really big hit, and sure enough, I got called for a head contact, and definitely it's on film. Kept everything below the shoulders. And one of the parents in the crowd, of my teammates very famously said, you can't call the noise. And that's the kind of territory that Nikishin enters, I feel, whenever he does lay those big message sending hits, open ice and against the boards. It's very entertaining to watch. And then he also has, a massive slap shot from the point. He's got very good game sense, very good awareness. He's a very intelligent player. He makes very good, wise decisions with the puck in terms of when to shoot, who to pass to, and where to shoot. He's really going to come into his own. I mean, he is every day or every game we see him, like I say. But I think in the long term, he's really going to come into his own. And I would really, really hope that he is doing that in the red, black, and white for the Carolina Hurricanes. But we'll see if those rumors amount to anything. But anyways, I don't want to harp too much on him. I don't want to harp too much on the team as a whole. As I said, things are going well. We don't have a whole lot new to talk about other than because the Canes have been on a break since about Saturday, I think now, and they're not playing again until tomorrow, Thursday. It's some of the teams are starting to catch up, but it's just because they're playing more games. They're kind of catching up in terms of games or moving beyond us in terms of games played. So other than that, it's the same old with Carolina. They're doing great. So what I wanted to do, recently there was an Instagram account that I am following on my Caniac Chronicles social media, kind of a similar account to mine. It's like I think it's a small town type of thing, a mom and pop type account, what have you. But it's carolinacraziacs. Love the name. It's a great handle. Great play on words. Really, really good, handle there. I like it. But he or she put out a slide deck really on Instagram of a number of potential trades in their mind. And I don't know how serious any of these are. Some of them definitely seem a lot less serious, in my opinion, than others. But it's about a slide deck of, I think, about 9 or 10 different options. So I wanted to just kind of humor that, go through it, and kind of give my commentary on each one. Because while some of them, like I said, seem sort of far-fetched, some of them are a little bit more interesting. And some of them, if you think about it for a little while, they start to become more interesting, like fine wine. You let it marinate for a little bit, and they begin to, I guess, look and appear a little bit more enticing than they originally did when, first glance. The first trade that they end up proposing, this is the one that I think is probably the least serious of all of them, so we'll get through it kind of quick. The offer is that the Canes would receive Robert Thomas, a center, and an assistant captain from the St. Louis Blues, in exchange for Alexander Nikishin, Bradley Nadeau, and then 2 first-round picks, one from the 2026 draft and one from the 2028 draft. Both of those picks were received from Dallas, I am guessing, in the Mikko Rantanen trade, without looking that up, but it's probably almost definitely correct. Like I said, definitely the least serious out of all of them, in my opinion. It's sort of entertaining in the sense that you are getting an assistant captain, guy who holds value for the team, big frontline center guy. I guess probably reminiscent of Jordan Staal, and he or she lists him as a consistent power play goal player when he's healthy. I looked at his stats. I looked at his contract. I think that is kind of a completely erroneous type of trade. I don't think anybody in the front offices of Carolina, I would hope nobody in the front offices of Carolina is entertaining that one. So we will move on from that relatively quickly. The next one is an interesting one. I like it. It's a 3-team trade from that would definitely, I think, in my opinion, work out in Carolina's favor ultimately. Although this is very complex and I think therefore highly unlikely, but we'll go through it anyways. So the 3 teams, it would be Minnesota Wild, the Vancouver Canucks, and then us, the Carolina Hurricanes. To start off, Carolina would receive straight up Jesper Wallstedt, the goalie from Minnesota, who's having a very similar career to sort of Brandon Bussey. Not quite as electric, but still very impressive. And then Elias Pettersson from Vancouver, who's definitely regarded as, a point getter for the Vancouver Canucks there. Has had at least one 100-point season. I believe he had 102 points in the 2022-2023 season. And then the one after that, I think 89. Those were his 2 peak years. So a guy who's capable, I guess probably sort of reminiscent of Jake Gensel, a little bit less there in terms of the stats. I think the career stats rather, but I would say they're similar in age and caliber. And then the Canucks would receive probably the most amount, the biggest package. They would end up getting Jesperi Kotkaniemi from Carolina, Bradley Nadeau, Ivan Ryabkin, and then the 2 first-round picks from Dallas from 2026 and 2028. And then the Wild would end up taking Freddie Anderson, Logan Stankoven, and then a second-round pick from your 2027 draft. Very interesting. It could end up playing out. Not the biggest fan of losing Logan Stankoven, although, again, I am open to it in the sense that, like I've said, he and Blake, in my opinion, come playoff time, I fully expect them to be separated from one another, and that's not to punish them, but that's to kind of protect them. They're both on the smaller side. I think I've mentioned one, if not both of them, is like either just my height or like just beneath my height. And I'm just your average typical guy. So it would be a bit of a risk, but you're getting a pretty nice deal in return to one very recent household name, Jesper Wallstedt. I think everybody's starting to hear his name around the league, very similar to Bussey. And then you do have a sort of a household name in Elias Pettersson. Although there is a little bit of a risk there because I don't quite think you're getting as much from Pettersson in terms of if we look through his season by season stats, and let me just pull them up here. He's been right around. He's very inconsistent. I'm guessing due to injury. Oh no, that might have been a COVID year. Yeah, 26 games played, maybe an injury plus compounded by COVID. But he's about a reliable 60-point getter in an NHL season, and that's less than a point per game. So, I don't know. I mean, let's see. Let me pull up Logan Stankoven quick, and we'll see, sort of how close they are to one another. But I do believe Logan is going to take it. Oh, no, maybe not. Logan's he's got a split season last year. So he almost got to 40 last year. It might be worthwhile. That would be a risk. That would be a trade I'd be willing to sort of come across my screen if it were to happen. Although there are, like I said, there's a lot of moving parts with that one. Don't quite know how realistic it is for that reason, but it has been done in the past. Three team trades tend to have a lot of different moving parts like this. So it could get done very well. But again, it would take a lot as well. This one I like to an extent. So this one is involving the Rangers. So the Rangers would need to take Jesperi Kotkaniemi. We would also give them a first-round pick from Dallas for the 2026 draft. a 4th-round pick from San Jose in the 2026 draft as well. And then we would receive Vincent Trocheck back after he left us to sign in free agency with New York. I don't hate this one. Trocheck gives you, if he brings what he brought to New York to the Hurricanes and really get under people's skin, really press buttons, if he's coming back, kind of recognizing his mistake, let's say, and saying, if you welcome me with open arms, I'm going to give you, what I've been kind of giving to you while he's been up there in New York when we play them, and getting in your people's heads, dealing with the Marchands of the other team, being your own Marchand for our team, that type of stuff. So we'll see it. Oh, I guess it looks like these trades were proposed by some of this account's followers, because it looks like he's crediting them at the bottom. So that's possible, but this might not be doable. I think it's enticing to New York because of the picks, the draft picks. Jesperi Kotkaniemi kind of gives you a new face to build around in there. In my opinion, New York really needs to rebuild and not just retool like Chris Drury says, but that would involve Chris Drury having to leave the front offices. And for whatever reason, they don't want to do that, so they're going to call it a retool. But these 2 picks should be valuable to New York. You never know, maybe Kotkaniemi and Zibanejad have some chemistry or some history with each other. They are from Finland and Sweden, respectively. So they're neighbors with each other. Who knows what's there? But you might be able to turn KK around and make him sort of your new semi-franchise face. I think you stick with Zibanejad there and see what goes down. But I really like that trade. If that were to happen, I think that's a winning trade for both sides, especially if it's coming from Trocheck that he wants to come back. Again, like I said, with sort of a tone like, I recognize, what I have done is a sin, and I want to repent, Father, kind of thing. I think it would definitely be worthwhile then. Okay, on to the next one. We're going to see, this one would involve Seattle. So this one would send Jackson Blake and Dominic Badinka plus a 3rd-round pick that came from Dallas for the 2027 draft pick to Seattle. And then the Canes would receive Shane Wright, who's a 22-year-old center rumored to be moved for a top 6 forward. I don't love this one. You just signed Blake to the contract here just, a year and a half ago. Jackson Blake is kind of lighting it up, especially as of late. And Shane Wright has by no means impressive stats by any feat of the imagination. If he had 144-point season in 2023, he had 2. In 2024, he had 5. And then currently he's sitting at 18. So no, I don't really think this is a move I would be willing to make. I would want to see the Canes make. So we'll move on from that one relatively quick. Next one also involves the Rangers as well as Vincent Trocheck. This one I like a little bit more. Again, it's for both teams, I think. I think both teams win a little bit more in this one. But I think ultimately this one would really be, okay, Carolina has sent a message. They're loading up. They feel like this is the year. This is the year that the hump is going to get over. And they need that extra firepower now come finals to really end the full journey to the end, the full marathon. That's the type of message that I think this deal would send if they could make it happen. And this one I do think would be potentially, it would be possible. I don't know the intricacies of any of this, but I think on paper this is a pretty even battle, a pretty even swap, But anyways, without further ado, so the Canes would receive, I'll start on the simple side. The Canes would receive Artemi Panarin at a 50% retention. So you're only taking half of his contract as a hit to your cap space, which again they have tons of. And then Vincent Trocheck in full. And then the Rangers would end up receiving Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Bradley Nadeau, and then a 1st-round pick from the next 3 draft picks, and the 2026 and 2028 picks being picks from Dallas. So you're giving up a decent amount of what's on the roster now. You can afford it. You certainly can afford, losing Nadeau. Although you don't want to, he's demonstrated a lot. He could get more minutes if he goes to New York. If they're going to rebuild, if they're going to retool. And he would be back with Scott Morrow, so you never know. He might end up seeing more time if he were to go to New York. So that might be a good thing for him. And then the same thing with Kotkaniemi. Like we said on the last Ranger potential trade, it could it could be a chance for him to reinvent himself. Maybe he takes more akin to the New York City type of lifestyle. You never know. And then they also get 3 first-round picks from us, each of which is, from the next consecutive 3 NHL drafts. So that would be interesting, and that would be neat if that were to happen. But again, the pressure would really be on that this is the year you need to get over the hump, and you need to close the deal, not just get over that hump of the Eastern Conference Finals. But I really like this one. I'll be keeping my eyes peeled. The next trade potential that's up here is Dougie Hamilton. So good old Dougie Hamilton's name is back in the media. It's funny, all these names are kind of coming back, wanting to come back to Carolina. They leave for the money, they leave for the bag, respectfully. I get it. You're a top valued player at your position. You're only that age and that, at that level of comparison once in your lifetime, let alone your career most likely. Take what you can get while you can from whoever it is. I get it. But it's funny, maybe these players might be coming back. Obviously, the team has been pretty accustomed to bringing players back. They've done it a number of times with including, Shane Gostisbehere, one of our top defensemen, on the roster today. This is his second stint technically now with Carolina. So very possible. It would be interesting to see if he comes back. My problem with him is that he just, doesn't stay healthy enough. He's so injury prone, but you aren't giving up as much in this trade. So it would be Dougie Hamilton is received at 33% retention. So you're only paying 2/3 of his contract in terms of the salary cap. So you're kind of getting him at a discount for whatever is left on that contract. And then the Devils would end up receiving Jesperi Kotkaniemi, as well as a 3rd-round pick that came from Dallas for the 2027 NHL deadline or NHL draft. My bad. The trade deadline is March 6th, so there's a good amount of time for all this stuff to happen. Can't wait to see, what all it will be. This one, I don't think I am too thrilled about this one. I don't feel the need to go back to Dougie Hamilton at this point. You could jeopardize that player spot a lot with whoever you're giving up. And yes, Jesperi is, I guess, considered not one of the worst things to give up at this point. But with the offense that's going on right now and it's clicking the way it is, especially if you keep Nikishin, I don't really feel the need to bring in Dougie Hamilton for more offensive prowess from the defensive line. Again, I like the physicality and the physical game that Jesperi brings, and I hope he starts to see more success so others can see that about him. But he has had a couple of assists recently that I've noticed, and I appreciate him for. So I'm willing to keep KK at this point in this trade, but it's not the biggest loss, and it could end up amounting to something very good if Hamilton can stay healthy throughout the entire journey. So back to the Canucks. This one's pretty loaded, very similar to another one. Canes would receive Pettersson as well as a 3rd-round 2027 pick, and then the Canucks would take Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Bradley Nadeau, Dominic Badinka, that 1st-round pick for 2026 from Dallas, as well as a 2nd-round 2027 pick. I don't know. You're downgrading a pick in return, and you're getting, what I have said based on the stats is not exactly the most impressive player, and I'm not quite sure what he would bring to fill in terms of a hole for this team off the top of my head, other than he would upgrade your size a bit, but you're not getting rid of Stankoven or Blake in this deal, so you are still dealing with their height disadvantage, if you will. So I'm not too big on this one. It could happen, and maybe with a little less components going to the Canucks, but we'll see. The Canes I have heard that the Canes are fairly big on Elias Pettersson. I think they are one of the teams that is, dialing Vancouver's landline regularly and often is kind of what I've heard or read. This one's very interesting, and I do like this one. I think this one is off the rip. This is the one I was referencing when I mentioned the wine and how this one needed to sort of marinate to get better for me, but it did. And that would be a trade involving the Blue Jackets. Our old good friend Don Waddell, involving Charlie Coyle in the Blue Jackets. So Jesperi Kotkaniemi would go to the Blue Jackets. Timur Mukhanov. I'm guessing a prospect in the in the system, and a third round pick that was received from Dallas for the 2026 draft would all go to the Columbus, and Charlie Coyle would make his way to the Carolina Hurricanes. I do think that is a major upgrade. Charlie Coyle he brings exactly what Jesperi Kotkaniemi brings to the table, but he's really itching to win, I feel. He's a gamer. He's a guy who brings his best, I feel, night in and night out. You see it on the ice every shift with him. He's a heavy forward. He can score the puck. He can make plays. He had a pretty good run there with Boston. I will admit I did hope a little bit more for him when we weren't having to play them, or when we were out of the playoffs and they were still in. Unfortunately, they couldn't do it while he was there, and he's kind of moved around since then. But it would be cool. He would be a pretty good swap, I feel, for KK. They have very similar games, but I guess I would argue that Charlie Coyle's, and I think most people would too, that Charlie Coyle's is a little bit more reliable, more developed. And then finally, one last trade prediction. We see the Jets receiving KK, Logan Stankoven, as well as a first-round 2027 pick, and the Canes would receive Gabriel Velarde. So this one and the first one, I really felt like this post was kind of bookend with two totally, buffoonery level trade proposals. I don't like either of those. The one for Robert Thomas from the St. Louis Blues, nor this Gabriel Velarde one. Neither player is impressive enough, I think, to warrant taking what they take in Nikishin for the St. Louis one, as well as Logan Stankoven for this Jets one. But nonetheless, that was fun. It was a good slide deck to go through. It definitely got me kind of thinking to myself, trying to brew up some trades of my own. Thinking about what we might see come from who. I think that there is big potential for Panarin maybe to make his way over. I think that there's potential for Carolina to make a move or a splash that is going to make us respond with let's see what happens from this. We think of some players out there that might want to make their way over, or might be a fit to make their way over. This one is very far-fetched. I have heard, it hasn't been recently, it hasn't been this season, but I have sort of heard talk about Connor McDavid having an open mind coming to Carolina. That would be an absolute bombshell type of trade if that were to happen, especially because I think he's only on a 2-year contract right now with Edmonton. So you got to figure if he gets traded right now, it's probably because he's asking for it. He wants to get out of here a little early. That would be interesting. We would certainly have to give up a lot. I would think Nikishin, at the very least, in that deal, probably send KK out that way if they were open to it. If not, Jackson Blake or maybe Logan Stankoven would be of interest to them. We have assets that they would be able to put together, I think, to make a deal that works. But I think Nikishin would probably be the starting asking price for that level of a trade. Similarly, I think maybe there's some potential in Toronto. Toronto's struggling. They might want to offload either Matthews or more likely, I think, Nylander, especially after his antics over this past weekend. He was seen in a sweet box from a fan who was recording him, and he gave a gesture you're not supposed to. Fined $5,000, a cool $5,000 from the league there. I think it's time. I mean, I think we're long overdue for some sort of message to be sent through the locker room there in Toronto. And maybe you have the opportunity to do that this year with Willie Nylander. I think more likely Toronto would like to commit to Austin Matthews. But again, if Nylander is going to be going here, something relatively big needs to go there. I don't necessarily think Nikishin would be the starting asking price, although I could see that be a 1-to-1 Nikishin for Nylander, or maybe Nikishin and one of those first round draft picks in the next 3 years or so would be sent their way to make that happen. But that would be interesting. That would be something I would be open to seeing. Toronto is one of those one of those geographic locations in the NHL culture that is known for a very highly scrutinizing media, a very high demand, high expectation type of fandom. And that type of pressure just doesn't always work for people. And Mitch Marner is probably one of the most recent examples of that that we can look to for, like I said, an example of such a thing. So those two I think are really the only two names that come to my mind. I kind of go through other teams and think what and who and where maybe. I don't think there's anything in the Flyers organization that we're going to end up eyeballing. Wouldn't say there's anything there for the Washington Capitals. In terms of blockbuster deals, I'm not trying to say there's nothing there whatsoever that might end up in a trade, but big blockbuster names, I don't think that anything is coming out of Philly, Washington, not even New Jersey, New York Islanders, no. Buffalo, maybe a Tage Thompson deal. Although Buffalo's making a good run, I don't necessarily think that they're going to want to change such a big aspect of their current roster, given their current situation. But we'll see where they're at in about a month and a half when the deadline rolls around. That mantra very well might be changed. Historically, it ends up changing by that time of the year, so we'll see. It might also end up, depending on how players do and how they come out of the Olympics, that could have some factors into it, so we'll see. And then one last one, I brought this up before, and I kind of gave up hope on it, and it's not the Kirill Kaprizov theory. It's actually the Brady Tkachuk theory. I would love to see Brady Tkachuk in a Carolina Hurricanes uniform. Like I was saying about Vincent Trocheck, Brady is an even more elevated version of him, a heavier guy, a faster guy, a more cross the line type of guy, just a guy who can score at will and then laugh in your face while he's celebrating type of personality. Carolina could really stand to benefit from having such a personality like that. And what is he doing for Ottawa? What has he done for Ottawa? What has Ottawa done for him as well? So I'm sure we're on his no movement clause. I feel like a lot of players on Ottawa put us on their no movement